In this video, I'm going to teach you how to properly use a reed knife to scrape bassoon reeds so that you're getting the most out of it and the best possible results without ruining your reeds. I'll go over some different types of knives and which one might be best for you. I'll go over how to hold the reed knife properly and also how to hold the bassoon reed, which is equally important while you're scraping. I'll go over a specific scraping technique, common mistakes, and finally, I'll end with some tips and advice for how to get the most out of your knife scraping and avoid mistakes. In bassoon reed making specifically, there are two main types of knives that I've seen used. There are the beveled knives, and then there's a double hollow ground knife. And you can kind of tell the difference by looking at the two of them. The beveled knife here on the left has a flat side, and then on the opposite side it has a bevel. And keep in mind, there are right-handed and left-handed knives. I'm right-handed, so both of these knives are right-handed knives, meaning this side is the side that should face away from you or forward if you're right-handed. And then on the right-hand side, we have a double hollow ground knife, and you can see that both faces of the knife come to a point, but there's still a clear side that should be facing the front or facing away from you, which is this right-hand side because it's a right-handed knife. Beveled knives tend to be a little bit cheaper, so they're a little bit more accessible if you're just starting out in your reed making, and that's totally fine if you start out with one of these. When I switched to a double hollow ground knife, I felt like I had a little bit more precision and control when I was scraping because of the finer point, and I felt like I was kind of like closer to the scraping edge when I was scraping, so it just felt better overall for me. But these knives tend to be a little bit more expensive. I'll link down to everything I mentioned in this video so you can check these purchases out for yourself. No matter what, the most important aspect to any knife, no matter what type of knife you use, is that it is extremely sharp. Knife sharpening is a huge topic in and of itself. There are many different types of techniques, many different types of materials and tools that you can use to sharpen your knives. I'm not going to get into it in this video. And I will say that knife sharpening is a topic that I'm still doing some self-exploration on. So let's start with how to actually hold the knife. It's pretty straightforward. Again, I'm right-handed, so this is all going to be from a right-handed perspective. However, everything is the same. If you're left-handed, it's just opposite, which I'm sure left-handers, I'm sure you're used to dealing with that. So a right-handed knife, typically I'm going to hold the knife just like this. There's nothing really special about it. It's just kind of a basic grip on the knife. I might twist the angle of the knife depending on what area of the reed I'm trying to scrape in. Actually holding it is not that big of a deal. It's when you get it to the reed that's a whole other thing. Now let's talk about holding the reed, because I think that's probably equally, if not slightly more important than how you hold the knife. So anytime you're scraping on a bassoon reed, you want to be using some type of plaque. There's lots of different types of plaques out there. I really like black plastic plaques because the plastic doesn't wear down your knife as quickly as metal does. And I like the black plastic because it's easier to see the cane come off as you're scraping. So that's what I've always stuck with. This particular plaque you'll see is a contra plaque. It's pretty big. It's meant for contra reeds. There's bassoon size and contra size. It doesn't really matter. At one point in my reed making journey, I started using contra plaques and just kind of kept up with it. I don't know. I feel like I like the extra surface area, but it doesn't really matter. Just get a plaque, because if you scrape on the reed without something supporting the interior, you run a high risk of cracking the reed from the stress. Now, a lot of bassoonists, I would say most bassoonists, use this tool, which is a mandrel. You might call it a holding mandrel because it's not meant for forming a reed. It's meant for holding a reed that's already finished. Just for reference, this is what the point of a forming mandrel would look more like. It comes to more of a point and it's generally longer, so it's meant for forming the reeds. You could use it for supporting the reed. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It just goes up further into the reed than you need it to because of how small it is. So if you're looking for one mandrel just for adjusting reeds, a holding mandrel or a short mandrel with a shorter point is going to be your best bet. Again, I'll link down to this in the description. Most bassoonists use a holding mandrel to hold the reed along with the plaque while they're working on it. And it'll look something like this or this. At one point in my reed making journey, I had a teacher who did not use the mandrel and just used the reed on the plaque, just holding the reed in your hand. I have come to really like this because I feel like I can get really precise angles and can get the reed in exactly the position. And I like my hand being all the way up on the reed. I feel like I have the most control this way. I no longer like having a mandrel here because I feel like it adds a lot of weight when I'm trying to work in really delicate areas on the reed. But just know, I would say most bassoonists use a mandrel. So you can buy one, and it's good to have one anyways. If you need to make wire adjustments, you have to have a mandrel in there. So if you don't have a mandrel, buy one anyways. But for reed scraping, it is an option. Let's talk about how to actually scrape on the reed now that we know how to hold the knife and how to hold the reed. So whenever you're scraping, no matter what area of the reed or what angle or whatever, you always want to have the reed supported with your left thumb. Again, this is from a right-hander's perspective. It would be your right thumb if you're left-handed. And what happens is by putting pressure against your left thumb, this is acting as sort of an anchor for the knife so that you have complete control over it. And then from there, you're going to find the area that you want to scrape. Let's say that I'm scraping this left corner of the reed, make contact with the reed and push, but you're not going to put a lot of downward force. This is why having a sharp knife is so important. You're just going to push away just like this. And if you have a sharp knife, you'll see a little bit of cane come off in the area that you're scraping. And that's important. I'll show you another area of the reed. Let's say I'm wanting to scrape this back channel of the reed. Okay, so I'm going to hold it in a way that allows me to get to that area. And I'm still going to hold it against my left thumb. And then I'm just going to make contact with the reed and gently push. When I'm coming back, I've lifted up the knife. So I'm not just going back and forth. It may look like that. If you watch me make reeds, it may look like I'm just quickly going back and forth, but each way on the way back, I am lifting the knife, and that's important. It's important to have really consistent, even strokes of the knife so that you get the cane taken off evenly and so that you prevent little ridges happening in your reed. If you start scraping really quickly and kind of erratically, then you might get these little ridges that come up, and that creates little bumps in the reed that's ultimately going to affect how the reed vibrates. That's not going to allow it to vibrate evenly. So let's say I want to scrape right-hand corner of my reed. When I did the left-hand corner, I had the reed basically horizontal to myself. Now that I'm doing the right-hand corner, I kind of want it going in the opposite direction, but it'd be really hard to get it exactly horizontal, and then my hand would be way over here. So I'm going to have it more at this kind of angle, and I'm going to be scraping it like that. If I want to scrape right in the middle of the spine, I'm going to have it pretty up and down, and I'm going to scrape right in the spine area. If I want to scrape the very tip, which is often used for response, I'm going to put actually quite a bit more force on my thumb, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to scrape off, and you'll hear the knife going against the plaque. And it sometimes will slowly force the plaque out, so you have to readjust the plaque. But if I'm trying to just get that very edge there, I'm going to go right there. But again, no matter what angle, no matter what area of the reed that I'm scraping, I always have my left thumb supporting the knife. This side has to face forward. And the reason for that, I'll just explain. If you look at the knife edge, maybe under a microscope, you wouldn't be able to see it here on camera. The way the knife is sharpened, there's a slight burr that comes up under the reed so that it can have this scraping motion. Most kitchen knives, for example, you need to cut up and down. And so you need a totally even tip pointing down. But because we're scraping, we need a little bit of a burr to be able to remove cane. So that's why right-handed versus left-handed and holding the knife correctly is super important, and that gets into sharpening technique and all of that. Let's talk about some common mistakes that happen when you're using a knife. Really common mistake with beginners is that you're not paying attention to where exactly that cane is being removed. You should see little pieces of the cane coming off, and that's telling you where you're removing the cane on the reed. Sometimes if you're trying to scrape this right-hand corner, but you've got your knife kind of angled downward a little bit, you might be taking some off the spine, or really a place you should never touch is this kind of heart of the reed, which is in the spine area, just behind the tip a little bit. You should never be scraping that area, especially on a finished reed. When you're just making adjustments, because you're just going to remove cane and you could totally kill the reed. Like, it needs a certain amount of substance. You can always remove cane, but you can never put it back on. You want to pay attention to where exactly that cane is coming off. And that's why kind of figuring out which angle, and maybe you need to rotate your knife ever so slightly. And maybe you need to experiment with, like, maybe the back of the knife might be a little bit easier to get the area. It takes time and muscle memory, trial and error to figure out, like, which area, how do I angle the reed and how do I angle the knife to get the correct area to scrape in. A super, super common issue that I see when folks are scraping is they will tear off a corner of the reed. Now, this is a really big issue, and you have to understand that the reed is made up of a bunch of fibers that are all running this way, vertical. There are all these fibers that are like this. If you're scraping like this, for example, like just to the side, especially around that tip where the cane is really thin, you're encouraging those fibers to split apart, and sometimes to the point where the tip is going to come off. And so when you're scraping in the tip area, you always got to remember that you can be scraping on the very corner. Maybe you want to take some cane out of the corner, but you always want to make sure that the final direction of the knife is that way, is towards the tip and not towards the side. Guaranteed your corners will come off. I guess the term is with the grain, not against the grain. Always scrape with the grain. Another common issue is that you're putting too much pressure on the reed and you're digging too deep into it, effectively ruining the reed. So this will happen a lot when your knife isn't very sharp, and you feel like you have to put a lot of pressure to be able to remove the cane. And that's a problem, because then you start getting an uneven scrape of the cane, and that's going to remove cane that you don't want to remove. When I was first starting out, I would scrape way too much out of the channels because I was trying to get like a perfect silhouette of the reed. And I was so focused on how the reed looks in the silhouette, which is when you hold it up to the light and you can see the lighter and darker areas, that I was just obsessed with trying to get those channels perfect. But I was just digging into the channels so much and making little rivets in the channel, and I just didn't need to be doing that. In general, it's better to just scrape a little bit, test the reed, scrape it a little bit more, test the reed. You can even count your scrapes. So if you're trying to remove cane from the tip, you could do 3 scrapes here and 3 scrapes here, flip it over, 3 scrapes here and 3 scrapes here, so that you have 3 scrapes and you know that you've evenly balanced the tip. Sometimes if you feel like the tip is not balanced, you don't want even scrapes. Maybe you want to scrape 5 scrapes on this side and leave the other side the same because you feel like the tip isn't balanced in some way. I want to give you some final tips and advice for getting the most out of your knife scraping. So first and foremost, always be safe when you're scraping. Never use the knife when you're like distracted or tired, because I've had a lot of bassoonist friends who will dig a huge gash in their hand because they're not paying attention and the knife slips and, they have to get stitches. Thankfully, I've never had a huge injury like that before, but it is very possible, especially when you have a sharp knife, which is great for scraping, but it can also make it very dangerous. A dull knife can also be dangerous because you don't have as much of a grip on the cane as well. So just always be mindful and careful about where you're scraping. Make sure that your finger isn't in the line of fire if the knife slips or you misjudge something. When you're getting frustrated with the adjustments you're making on a reed, a lot of times it's because your knife isn't sharp enough. Like you're just not removing cane evenly because maybe one part of the tip is sharp and the other part isn't. And so you're getting an uneven scrape because one part of the knife is removing cane and another part isn't. Also, when you're first starting to scrape, start with old, dead reeds first, like your old reeds that you're not going to use again. Make adjustments on those reeds and then try them out and see what they do. Don't start scraping on your best reeds until you really start to feel confident about what parts of the reed do what for each scrape. And I have a whole YouTube playlist on reed making and adjusting. I will link it here, where I address common reed issues and what you should do in different situations and with different tools and whatnot. Check out that playlist if you're having specific problems with your reed and you're trying to diagnose what's going on. Another tip is to scrape on when the cane is dry. When the reed is wet, the cane will sometimes feel like it's peeling off, and sometimes it comes off in bigger chunks than when it's dry. I recommend, especially when you're starting out, just scrape on dry reeds, and then when you have to scrape on a wet reed because you're adjusting it and playing it and adjusting it and playing it, just be really mindful and maybe scrape a little bit less than you would if it was a dry reed. My final tip for you is to buy high quality reeds to start with. I really highly recommend, even if you get comfortable with scraping and adjusting reeds, if you're buying like a low quality, student quality, mass produced reed that tends to be cheaper, and then adjusting it, you're still not going to end up with a really great reed at the end, because the way the reed was made from the very start isn't the most conducive to having a super high quality tone and sound and control of the reed. Buy reeds that are handmade by professional bassoonists. There's lots of different options online. If you'd like to try the reeds that I make, I'll throw a link down in the video description. And you can always tell me if you're looking for something in particular in your reed. You just throw it in the order notes, and you can tell me if you're a beginner, and I will generally make the reed a little bit more responsive for you, because I know that you haven't formed your embouchure muscles yet. If you're more of an advanced player and you're looking for a certain quality in your reed, a certain pitch tendency or a certain dynamic level or a certain affinity for a low register or high register reed or whatnot, I can make small adjustments in the reeds to start with to fit your needs. If the reed is made really well in the beginning, it should only just need light little adjustments here and there as you're breaking it in to get the best part of the reed. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into schools and worked with students who are playing on really poor quality reeds, and it's like I have to clip the tip and then I have to like scrape a bunch of cane off the reed just to get it to vibrate properly, and it still doesn't sound good. And that's me, a professional with professional reed making experience, not being able to get a reed to work. So that just goes to show you that it's so important to have high quality reeds. And just for watching this video, I'll throw a code for 15% off your first order of reeds from me, so you can try them out at a discount and see if they work well for you. I hope this video is helpful for you. If it was, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and comment your questions down below. You'd like me to dive into a more specific area of the reed, or you're having a specific issue with your reeds, let me know and maybe I can do a video on it and dive more into that topic in the future.